Hi, my name is Sasha. I'm a Russian trans activist and I'm recording this video right now to try to raise awareness about what's been happening in Russia. In early June, the Russian parliament, Gosduma, has announced a new anti-trans bill banning medical and administrative transition. This initiative, which has so far received very little condemnation in Russia or internationally, is actually the biggest attack on LGBT rights in the history of contemporary Russia. The bill, which is supported by Russian parliament, seeks to ban all legal and medical transition in Russia, with the rare exceptions granted to intersex people who will be able to access medical procedures following examination by a medical commission. Transition will become de facto de jure illegal in Russia. If the law is retroactive, it will not only prevent new transitions, it will also render impossible the legal existence of tens of thousands of trans people living in Russia who have already undergone a gender change in their civil documents. It will also criminalize doctors who will be brave enough to offer care to trans people even in hiding. Putin's anti-trans war is not an isolated legislative attack. It comes directly after the law already passed last autumn against LGBT propaganda, banning any mention of LGBT people in media, books, on the internet, and in cinema. And it's all part of Putin's deeply reactionary ideological project. The government is launching attacks on LGBT people not only to distract the population from the military defeats on the Ukrainian front, which Russia invaded in February 2022, but also to realize Putin's vision of a traditional Russia based on the Christian heterosexual family in opposition to the West Putin fantasizes about with its free-for-all sexual freedom, children transitioning before hitting puberty, and woke minorities conspiring with Satan to abolish God. This war is a practical implementation of Putin's homophobic and transphobic rhetoric that we've been hearing for the last decade.
Мы видим, как многие евроатлантические страны фактически пошли по пути отказа от своих корней, в том числе и от христианских ценностей, составляющих основу западной цивилизации. Отрицаются нравственные начала и любая традиционная идентичность, национальная, культурная, религиозная или даже половая. Проводится политика, ставящая на один уровень многодетную семью и однополое партнерство, веру в Бога или веру в сатану.
The proposed anti-trans law is part of an overall natalist policy of the Russian state, which is increasingly seeking to restrict access to abortion and to favor births. Putin's regime needs the cis heterosexual household to achieve its demographic objectives, goals that are obviously not helped by the 18-month-long war, which has mowed down tens of thousands of young men conscripted to the front and has driven over 1 million Russian citizens into permanent exile. Anti-trans and anti-abortion laws are coming hand in hand. The Russian regime is undoubtedly inspired by the offensive of the Republican Party in the United States, which has succeeded in banning abortion altogether in 14 GOP-controlled states, while at the same time banning transition for trans minors in 13 red states. Reactionaries are attacking the right to control one's own body, to take revenge on all the gains made by the feminist and LGBT movement in the last 5 decades. Trans people have already been forced to emigrate from Russia by the hundreds to escape military conscription, which has been launched in several waves since the start of the war with Ukraine. And this conscription has affected all people with male civil status, including trans women who have not transitioned and trans men who have transitioned. The terror of military conscription and anti-LGBT laws add to the devastating impact of war and sanctions on oppressed populations. If this war passes, and there's every reason to believe it will, transitioning will become illegal and the lives of trans people in Russia will be made simply impossible. Banning legal and medical transition leads to exclusion of trans people from all spheres of society, from education, from the job market, from the healthcare system. It also means driving trans people to suicide and making them easy targets for hate crimes. This proposition will result in deaths of trans people. This policy will make Russian legislation one of the most reactionary in the world on gender issues. In the current context, it will be very difficult to flee Russia for poor trans people because the costs of emigration are far too high. Fleeing will be made all the more difficult by the fact that many European borders are close to Russian citizens whom NATO states consider complicit in the war launched by the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. In the face of Putin's reactionary policy of eradicating trans people, we need an international mobilization to demand the total opening of European borders to refugees, and in particular to all those fleeing Russia because of the war and because of reactionary wars. And I would like to finish this video by asking you to donate to a Russian queer organization called Queer Svit, which is helping trans people right now to obtain the documents and visas necessary to flee Russia. This is a very important moment, and we see the attacks against trans people happening all over the world. So we need to be prepared for those attacks and to stand in solidarity with those that are facing the worst consequence of them right now in this actual moment. So please tell your friends, tell your community, your LGBT community, that this is happening in Russia right now, that we need to organize in solidarity with Russian trans people. We need to organize events to raise awareness about what's been happening, and we need to organize donation campaigns for Queer Svit so that they help as many trans people as possible to escape Russia in this moment.